Ja, mijn lichten gaan uit, zo direct.
Ja. Kan Melanie ons zien?
Hey.
Ja?
Melanie ziet jou.
Ja, oké, goed. En dus ook horen.
Ja, kan je ook horen.
Eén plek, één stoel, één plek weer.
Okay, Melanie. Hello, how are you?
Hey.
I just introduced everybody. Alice introduced the place where we are, the Glazen Huis, and I just told everybody what sort of, in a very brief thing, what is Queer Currents and why we are so excited to have you here. So you're like on the big screen now, and we have around, I think, 20 people, so that you know who is watching live.
Okay.
So welcome and welcome at Queer Currents. Great you're here, and you're actually in Berlin. So let's try and let's hope that every technical thing works out well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I already told that we all love you, so whatever happens, we still love you.
Okay. Yeah. I don't see anything now. I just see a beach. It looks great. I think you have to put your nose against the screen. Okay, but maybe it doesn't matter. So, shall I start?
Start, yes. We're
okay. Okay, I'm gonna start with showing you a video. Host disabled attendee screen sharing. Starts great. So you need to enable screen sharing for me. Boom, 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 boom. No, this is your screen. You can take over. Jamming my lecture. Dun, dun, dun. We'll work it out.
It's trial and error thing.
I'm pressing the share screen like we rehearsed before. Dum, dum, dum. We can take all a deep breath together for everybody in the audience. Maybe hum a little bit. Make our nervous system nice and relaxed until we figure out these details. I'm gonna try one more time. It's not working. I'm trying to stare at the screen really hard in order to solve it.
You can share now.
Okay. Desktop. Are you seeing my screen?
yes.
All right, cool. So let's look at this little video.
All right, so here we are in front of the elephants. Cool thing about these guys is that they have really long fronts, and that's cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say.
And that's pretty much all there is to say. So what you just have been looking at is the first clip ever uploaded on YouTube. I still hear something. What am I hearing? Okay.
So now, since morning we don't do the.
I'm trying to get my nerves down on the Zoom thing. So what you've just been seeing is the first video clip ever uploaded on YouTube. This was in 2005 and apparently had something very interesting to say about something that we have never thought about before. But what we're seeing is a young man standing in front of an elephant, and what it signifies for me as a researcher of animal representation online or non-human person representation online is that the development of the internet and the way we perceive animals today is closely interwoven. I'm going to share my screen again and start a slideshow, and I will elaborate a little bit about my research of the last years that ended in a publication and in a film that I made about this particular subject. So, screen sharing. Okay, are you seeing this?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, it's on. So, the lives of non-human animals and online representation is closely interwoven. And that is why the symbol of the animal has drastically changed over the past couple of years. There are more animal pictures than there ever were, while the diversity of species is forever collapsing due to human profit-driven choices. We make more animal pictures in one day today than in the last 100 years together. The physical animal kingdom will be transformed fully into the virtual, imaginary, and symbolic realm. We will hear echoes all over the planet. And that especially counts for the numerous animal species on the bridge of extinction. The more pictures uploaded, the less species in the wild. One of the immediate notions about funny animal pictures online is that the animals are in the painful process of being assimilated into human culture. Before the popularization of the internet, only 15 years ago, our main leaders in nature education and media were institutions like National Geographic, Documentary Channel, and the BBC. These wildlife documentaries and publications informed us through the lens of biology and science about nature. 100 years after the first wildlife film appeared, the last days of this genre have started in a world where almost no wilderness has been left untamed, where technology and nature are traditionally seen as opposed. They now appear to merge or even trade places. As many of you know, National Geographic magazine has since 1888 been an international symbol of wildlife representation, with high quality photos and its iconic white-yellow border, educating people all over the world about nature according to the norms of science. Nature was captured without actually questioning the lens through which it was observed, namely a Western, heteronormative, capitalist, imperialist, colonialist, white supremacist, and patriarchal lens. We have seen animals mating, playing, sleeping, hunting, grazing, rearing children. The wildlife photographer was characterized by its patience and commitment to their subject, to catch that one glimpse, that one image that would place us, the spectator, in awe of nature's greatness and inaccessibility. National Geographic wants to educate people through enchantment with a particular political view, which, according to me, is now outdated and belongs to a world that no longer exists. So, are you seeing me now?
Your desktop.
Yes, hi. So, for the last 15 years, I have been collecting these images online from the start of the internet, and I've been categorizing them in new definitions of how we could perceive nature. And this has ended up in a publication that we're now going to have a look at, designed by Experimental Jet Set. Let's see if it works from the PDF. Can you see this?
Not yet, no.
No. All right, why not? Okay. Once again.
Yep.
Yeah, all right, forgot to share. Have to get into my Zoom routine. I was doing social media distancing, but here we go. Are you seeing this?
Yes.
Okay. So what you see here is what nature looks like today. So my question for the start of this publication was, can we send the internet's funny animal pictures into space for aliens to discover the Earth's ecosystem? And through that question, I invite you to look at this publication, these images that you're about to see. And another thing, as an approach to understanding the world around us, was instead of opposing theory, would be to ask questions. And how can we transcend the polarity through which we perceive our world into a more queer, complex, intersectional web of truths, and through that find our position within this ever-changing context that we call reality. I will come back to this later. So, here you see category number 1. So this publication is based on reinventing the structure away from conventional rules of sciences and early types of anthropology, and how they categorize cultures and species according to a species model that doesn't reflect on itself and is outdated. What I believe needs to happen is reinventing new categories, such as animals and emotions, like anger. As you can see here, one of the things that we don't want animals to perform is anger. Instead of making truth statements, reflect on what questions are we asking ourselves, such as, how much do mothers and their babies get paid by zoos? Isn't it time that all animals in the zoos should meet each other? Should putting a non-human on display for human enjoyment be a human right? Can a polar bear develop a love for a bucket? And can this be described as a new non-human emotion? What kind of portrait of humanity and the state of Earth, culture, do these images give us? What happens to cute animal babies online when they grow up? Do new forms of violence surface due to new forms of care? Did you ever feel like something that could be possessed or owned? Is privacy a privilege? At what convenience do we love animals? Do these pictures imply that we are turning animals into humans? Does that mean animals should have human rights? Because ultimately, what animal representation and documentation tells us is something about us, people. What we really see in these images, if we look closer, is perhaps the ultimate cultural shadow of centuries of suppression through the objectification of nature and the animal, making cruel exploitation possible. Now, this is taken out of its repression by extreme and perverse representation, addressing the opposite of objectification. What we see in these images is the ultimate projection of subjectification on non-human persons, and as a taxonomy of qualities we wish to externalize from the human. Cute, sweet, funny, connected, curious, surrendered, happy, safe, trusting, loving, forgiving, loyal, and who doesn't want to be cuddled? We like to look for the human inside the animal, but we deny the inner self in animals. The animal is consumed. The natural world has become a Disney horror-like scenario with colored fields and babbling animals, which are kept hostile by our fantasies, which are projections of our repressed and disowned part of ourselves, our contemporary incapability, and lost art of true intimacy. In this process, the animal again is deprived of its dignity and right to exist and perform its species' inherent characteristics without human intervention. Through this publication, I'm trying to find a language to communicate about the stressful situations of oppression created by human behavior, consciously or unconsciously, by inflicting proximity violence on other species and pointing out the complex entanglement of love in relation to structures of power that people have for non-human persons. The fact that there is an infliction on the animal's inherent worth is often covered up by superficial and selfish desires. What this research shows is what makes the animal move in strange ways is human desires. What appears in these images is that there is an intuitive recognition that these animals are made casualties of purely human problems, such as the modern human's disconnection to nature, its own species, and most of all, ourselves. Aren't non-human persons, like humans, molded and remolded by love? There's an incredible amount of care and love in this publication, but often it is love and care taken, placed in a very hybrid and compromised situation. For the animals, of which most is an infliction caused by human behavior. What these images tell us about the human impact on our planet can hardly be underestimated. rapid decrease of biodiversity, extinction, exhaustion of soil, the unmanageable accumulation of waste, global warming, exponential growth of air pollution, and destruction of natural habitat. Lots of things are happening which are new to the history of humans and the history of animals. In the last 100 years, local landscapes have been disrupted and subdued to global landscapes in order to use animals for science as a tool on other life, bringing them as species to foreign places, kill them in trophy hunts, and use them for all sorts of means. Animals have been deprived from feelings, but they can still have bad luck. We are left with a clear message. If animals were more intelligent, they would deserve better treatment. This message also contains a warning. If animals were more intelligent, they would also need more control, lest they would become a danger to the human who seeks to capitalize their use. Made evident in this publication is the idea of Dr. Bradshaw around trans-species psychology. Her take on it is, animals who are taken out of their local habitat or whose natural landscapes have been too much invaded by humans and are confronted with changes in their species and are therefore having a bicultural identity, that of a human and that of their own. These images show us situations new to the history of species. Therefore, my proposal is species need to be redefined and renamed, like a zoologian. What this means is that a lion captured and living in a zoo sanctuary for generations is perhaps now no longer a lion, as they have lost capacity inherent to their species in the wild, such as hunting. Instead of hunt, the lion is conditioned to be cuddled in order to receive food or be on display or whatever they can do to make the economic benefits of the zoo work. So perhaps a new language is needed to define what these species can mean for us in the future. Species languages are being lost and new ones are being born. Many claims on behalf of animals do not compete with real human needs at all, and therefore do not seem to stand in the same line. Psychological trauma that many of these animals suffer from changing the future identities of these species in a fundamental and irrevocable way, including trauma preserved in their bodies and memory influencing future generations, and generational trauma. Because what the mind cannot hold, the body does. People appreciate a likeness and denying a likeness when it becomes inappropriate for them. Issues around animals and human animals and animal-human conflicts are not about animals, but about human conflicts, revolving around questions of social justice, human introspection, and the politics of suffering. In their political theory of animal rights, non-human animals are seen as political actors. Different types of animals stand in different relations to human political communities. And although we should respect the basic inviolable rights of all animals, these different relations lead to different rights and obligations. Domestic animals should be seen as citizens in shared human-animal communities. Wild animals form their own sovereign communities, and liminal animals, who are wild but live amongst humans, should be seen as de-citizens. This is described in the book Zoopolis and offers a new agenda for both the theory and practice of animal rights, as well as new perspectives on animal agency and human-animal relation. The rupture of the lands of non-human persons, their lives and history, is a mirror in the legacy of rupture in their brains, bodies, and behavior, and that comes to us through their representation. The object of interest is not just the animal or environment, but the dialogical space in between, which turns out to be a site of drama. Seen through these funny images, which ironically gives people a sigh of relief, making the destruction of their earth seem less gruesome. In order to do justice to the broad spectrum of types of love, there is a necessity for a broader vocabulary for love and feeling necessary. Language is power. Once something can be communicated, it can become part of someone's worldview. Indeed, people do not only express their thoughts in language. Language also influences the way people think about certain issues. Queerness is flowing between opposites. We want to ace an eco-queer identity that provides a central place for values typically misrepresented in traditional ethics, like care, love, friendship, trust, most significantly, reconceive what it means to be human and animal. By rejecting abstract individualism, an eco-queer identity would recognize that all human identity and more conducts are best understood in terms of networks, webs, or historical and concrete relationships. The scenes that we see here explore cross-cultural speciesism that we've never seen before in the documentation of animal photographs or films. With eco-queer values at heart, we want to develop a vision beyond merely rejecting the divisions of a heterogender trait, values, and behaviors. What I hope this publication will give is a diversity of safer and more inclusive behaviors that celebrate and sustain biodiversity, ecological justice, an interspecies community, eco-eroticism, and ecological economics, playfulness, and direct action, resistance to corporate capitalist eco-devastations. Nature is not hetero, nature is queer. Relations can be perceived in so many different ways. It is stuck within an anxiety that it has to fit within certain stereotypes. And what all these new animal pictures online tells us is that there's much more possible than we ever thought could be. And that was it for this, for my view on the publication. Thank you very much for listening. So after this body of work was finished, the idea was, yeah, what I'm like, would kind of be curious, what are you feeling in your body after you saw these images? Because what it did to me was, I wanted to make a document about animal rights and the urgency I felt through bringing forward certain values and around creating more respect and safety for animal lives and how we treat nature at large. And I didn't want to go through the line of like, now we see all the bad things from the meat industry and impose this guilt on us as humans. I also find the pictures myself very entertaining, you know, even though I'm also horrified by them. And after putting them all into these categories, I felt, deeply sick. And I noticed that the reason for that was because the impact of these images, after seeing so many in a row for so many weeks, for so long, was exactly the same as looking at some slaughterhouse animal rights activist film, or at least the effects that it had in my body. But still, I hope that through these types of images, the complexity of love, care, and proximity violence are brought more forward, and also that we all think about our position within that system. So my curiosity after making this particular work was like, how do children feel about the environmental crisis, and how do they think about capitalism? What kind of position do they take within that system, and how do they perceive animal pictures online? And so what we did is we made a film in which we showed a lot of similarities to this publication, but in video form to children, to hear about what their opinion was about the state of the world, basically, and also what they thought would be a solution. And this was also to take away the kind of brightness of a child that is in touch with their emotions, and to give voice to the generation that will take care of us and of this planet soon. And how are they going to deal with this overload on information, where the complexities and the contradictories of human behavior are so noticeable because of the information that comes through to us through the internet. And this is something that I noticed, like making this film with the children, that the impact of violence and the awareness of the violence inherent in the human species is so much larger than it was when I grew up, for example, because of the access of information that they have about the contradictory behavior of humans, of us. And with that, I mean, like, you know, maybe they want to save the ocean because the dolphins get caught in plastic, but then at the same time they go to the shop and they buy their groceries in plastic bag, just like me, just like I also do that. And then you're caught in this web, like, how can I consume this and still feel empathy and care for those species far away? And then the tragedy of, like, how do I show up in this narrative that we're all creating, and how can I actively change that narrative? So we brought together a bunch of 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds that to me are still in the mystical child world, but also kind of have a glimpse of what an adult world really means. And I want to show you a little aspect of that. So I'm going to share my screen again. And if I can find where I put it. Give me a second. Yes. And this one is almost on. Okay.
Wat is dat nou weer? Zit het hagedis of zo op een lolly? De hagedis zit op de vinger. Oh ja, de hagedis zit gewoon op een vinger. Ja, op de duim.
Ze zijn piano aan het spelen. Dat filmpje heb ik laatst gezien. Ik weet niet er zitten bevers in een kooi. En ze kunnen net met hun poten doorheen. Er staat zo'n keyboard hier zo. En dan gaan ze allemaal met de vingers zo. Maar ze kunnen best goed piano spelen. Ik heb dat filmpje gezien.
Nou, ik heb wel eens gezien dat er makaken waren. En dat zijn een soort apen. En dat ze toeristen zeg maar overvielen bijna. Want dan gingen ze eerst een beetje bedelen om eten. Maar daarna gingen ze gewoon alles stelen.
Ja, dat een beetje erbij. Hierom vliegt me dan een technische bij.
Want dat is het laatst op het nieuws dat ze tijgers achter een drone lieten gaan rennen omdat ze dik waren. Maar het is ook niet goed, want straks dan denken ze dat de drones, dat gewoon hun prooi is en dat ze daarop moeten jagen.
Ja, omdat ze misschien dat soort geluiden niet vaak horen in de wildernis. Dat ze ineens denken, wauw, wat is dit? Zo.
Als zeehonden dezelfde emoties zouden hebben als mens, zou die het niet zo leuk vinden.
Ik denk dat hij daardoor dat mensen dan, als ze zo gaan doen, dat dan heel de omgeving kunnen scannen. Als ik zou zien dat er een beer in mijn keuken is opeens, dan zou ik denk ik de keihard naar boven rennen en iedereen waarschuwen en dan zou ik door het raam naar beneden gaan. Ik zou geen filmpje maken. Ik zou sowieso ook wel de dierenambulance bellen, vragen of die de beer dan vrij kan zetten.
Ik zou geen thuis op de bank helemaal niet. Nee. Ik denk dat hij wilde zitten, maar hij had geen plaats. Dus hij moest wel even op een auto gaan zitten. Het is natuurlijk een snelweg. Of gewoon een weg waar auto's moeten komen. En niet voor olifanten, want dan zou het wel voor olifanten zijn. En dan staat die hele weg er niet.
Oh my god, there's a bear on my car! Oh my god!
Ik vind het wel goed dat beren ook wel een beetje lol kunnen hebben.
Ik zou hier zelf nooit in de auto willen zitten. Ik ook niet. Ik denk dat de personen in de auto het denk ik niet leuk vinden. Nee, want het is best een dure auto. En als je weet hoe zwaar olifanten zijn en die gaat dan ook echt erop liggen, dan denk ik dat die auto wel kapot gaat en gaat inzakken. Ja. En een olifant is duurder dan een auto. Een auto die kan wel 500 of 600 euro zijn. Maar een olifant die kan echt wel denk ik meer dan 3000 euro zijn.
Maar aan de andere kant is het toch wel heel iets anders. Dan kan je wel gewoon zeggen, ja, er is een beer achter op mijn auto geweest.
In het huis. Volgens mij zit de giraf in een gevangenis. Nee, en dit is trouwens ook een goed klein girafje. Giraffen zijn nog zijn net zo groot als iPads.
Hoe groot zijn iPads?
Zo ongeveer. Giraffen die zijn niet net zo groot als een iPad. En ik denk dat de giraffen aan het uitsterven zijn.
Misschien is is er iets aan de hand met de moeder of zo. Dat de dierenverzorger de melk geeft en niet de moeder.
Mijn moeder zou het echt niet tof vinden als ik bijvoorbeeld word gepakt en word opgevoed door andere, misschien wel katten. Want wij pakken wel babytjes af van katten en dan worden ze opgevoed door mensen.
Misschien is de moeder doodgegaan of heeft een ziekte dat de melk niet meer gezond is. Dat de melk van een andere giraf komt.
In het echt drinkt die baby giraf waarschijnlijk ook melk. Maar het is niet normaal dat hij dat dan krijgt van een wildvreemde man. Ik denk dat ze de aap willen helpen. Ja. Ook omdat de aap in een probleem is of zo. Of ziek is. Of geen moeder meer of heeft en vader.
Maar het is ook dan wel zo dat een giraf dan wel meteen in de krant komt staan.
Een ijsbeer in een zwembadje. Want de ijsbeer die in de sneeuw. Ja, maar daar is een heel groot zwembad. En dus steeds minder ijsberen komen. Dus daarom gaat het ijs breken en dan komt een heel groot zwembad. Als ze in een klein zwembad zitten, dan gaan ze dood. Nee, ik ook niet. Dan moeten we beter om de wereld zorgen. En hem eruit vissen.
Nee, ik zou niet bij die beer in het zwembad gaan. Ja, dat zou ik wel doen. Ik zou er wel een filmpje van maken. Ik zou ook best wel in de foto willen zijn. Zo dicht bij een ijsbeer kom je normaal niet. Ik denk dat de octopus en de knuffel een soort van dansen. Want de octopus gaat de hele tijd met de armen zo. En dat doet hij zo met verschillende bewegingen. En de knuffelbeer beweegt niet, want hij zit de hele tijd zo. En de knuffelbeer kan niet echt bewegen. Dus hij deed de hele tijd dit over zijn benen. Ik weet niet wat er met die teddybeer is, maar die is ook gek. Die is zo schattig. Of de beer vindt de teddybeer lief. Ik denk dat dieren wel van knuffelberen houden en knuffels. Het lijkt gewoon op gewone dieren. En ze zijn ook net zo zacht. Ik denk dat dieren wel bevriend kunnen worden met andere dieren. Want als ze met elkaar geboren worden, dan weten ze niet dat het, zeg maar...
Wordt het geboren als een...
Ja, dat het een prooi eigenlijk is. Want ik zag een keer een foto van een vos en een kip die heel erg bevriend waren. Ja, in dat boek. En een beer en een kat. Waarschijnlijk dacht die beer dat die kat een babybeer was.
Ik denk dat mensen en dieren beter niet kunnen proberen vrienden te worden. Want stel je voor, de mensen sterven ooit uit. En die beesten zijn dan dus afhankelijk van ons.
Good girl. Door open. Come on, get it cold.
Volwassen. Ben je een baby? Nee, volwassen. Ben je een baby? Nee, het is een volwassen. Nee hoor. Want baby's zijn nog veel kleiner. Het is echt een volwassen. Er is ook zo'n bepaald dier, genaamd de blobvis. Ja. En die is echt verschrikkelijk lelijk. En dan worden er allemaal slechte presidenten vergeleken met hem. En allemaal grapjes over hem gemaakt en zo. Want hij heeft een hangneus. En hij kijkt zeg maar zo. Echt helemaal niet lachend. En dan komt een soort slijm uit zijn mond. En ik bedoel, we kunnen het wel grappig vinden. Alleen, stel je voor, er is een heel lelijk iemand op aarde. En ja, kijk, eigenlijk mijn voorbeeld was dat het bij dieren niet om de schoonheid gaat, maar gewoon om hoe ze zijn. Ik denk dat het hele nieuwsgierige beesten zijn. En dat ze alles willen weten, hoe het ruikt en hoe het eruit ziet.
Misschien is het slow motion.
Ik ga het even uitzetten, want het duurt ietsje langer dan ik had gedacht. Oké, dat was een excerpt. En ik wilde nog I wanted to open up the space for are you still there?
Yes, we are.
It's a bit lonely here. So I wanted to open up the space. We have a couple of minutes left for questions, if that's possible, or I don't know if it's
Yes,
possible.
for sure.
Okay.
Any questions? How did you assemble all these kids? Did you approach them via school, or is it a different project that you contacted them?
Yeah, we went through our network and asked around for kids, and then we did actually a casting. So kids who are really comfortable just in front of the camera, and also, yeah, that's basically it. Yeah. I wanted to say something else about this film, but I forgot, but maybe it comes back, yeah. So yeah, that's how we found the kids.
Did you show the slides that we saw in the beginning? Did you show them to the kids as well, or did you just make a selection of images that would appeal to them to give a reaction?
We put the publication in the room where they went to relax and play around, and just had them look at it just to get them into the subjects. And then we had specific kind of categories, like in the publication, about like interspecies that are usually enemies, or animals being stuck in human food leftovers, or being lost in some kind of way, trying to escape from a zoo, and then confront them with these specific subjects and what they thought about this.
And did they also give you a reaction, not only what their emotion, the children's emotions were, but did you ask them for how if they saw the problem and how they could solve it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's later on in the film. So in the final chapter, it's more like, so what shall we do, and how do you feel about this? And then it's kind of, the conclusion was, there's like a tragedy going on, like they feel sad and they feel conflicted. And there seems to be, with this specific kids who grew up in the Netherlands in urban situations, because we chose them because they were living in cities, and we're not really in touch with any type of, like, farm even, or let alone wilderness, because that's not really present. One of the options is like, I'm totally fine for letting go like most of my comfort and wealth, and really accept a more simple lifestyle, if you would also do it. Yeah. So that was one of the suggestions. But some of them are also like, yeah, we're kind of misanthropic about the whole situation. Yeah, and also what I thought was so crazy is that if they would give examples of anything contradictory in like their storytelling, we would find an image online that would illustrate like their bizarre imagination, so the imagination was already behind on the reality, like it was already filmed, it was already documented, like we were able to source it from somewhere, because there's so much available, and there's so much trophy about being close to a wild animal. And then there's also like, who's able to be close to a wild animal, wild in that kind of way, and who takes those pictures. And then we see it's like mostly like white people coming from the West who have money to go on these journeys and feel entitled to these certain practices. So it's also entangled in this whole economic system of which some people profit and the others don't. And that all is visible in these like, in the power dynamics that you see if you really look at these images, you know, like what is actually happening here? Where is it happening? Who's in the picture? Who took the picture? Yeah.
It's very hard for children maybe to make that relation between all those aspects of.
Now I can't hear it.
The question is that it's very difficult for the children to make the distinction and the aspects of the pictures and the reality.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, what is reality? You know, that's more what I get out of it. Like, reality is what we make of it, you know? Like, who defines the lens through which we perceive something as true or untrue? And what we see in these images is like, they have no clue anymore. And me, I also don't have a clue, you know, like, because everything is changing so fast in context. Like, that's what I'm trying to say also, like, if a lion is captured in a zoo for generations, you know, is it still the same species? Like, we also have like consumption pigs and like wild pigs, and, you know, everything is mutating depending on a multi-leveled intersection of the environment, the inner world, the outer world, how we are perceived, like who's in control of what. But what I notice when I see it is like humans are everywhere and influencing everything. And, you know, this documentation is proven very stressful for the animals, like all these colors and like drones for the sake of science are actually super traumatizing and fearful, and adrenaline give adrenaline rushes in the animals that are just like, I'm walking here in the wild doing my thing. So it's like, yeah, man, just maybe we should give them a break. Like, yeah.
A lot of adults do not understand as well. If you same with adults, they would probably have maybe the same reaction that children have. Like, they laugh about it and they don't make the connection with what the real problem is.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to do this education, you know, about the complexity of what we're actually looking at. And this was just a tip of the iceberg, of course, because if you really look at it, it's all about money. Surprise. Because money is what defines power. And if you don't have an economic value as a species, you're fucked. Unless you're like really small and live, for example, in an area where a panda lives, that is highly like the A-star superstars of preservation, because they are using a wide habitat because of this one panda that is not important at all for the whole ecosystem, or very little. A whole area is preserved with that, you know, so, and preserved, yeah, that's a whole other thing as well. Like, what does that mean?
Can I ask a question? I'm curious, did you show the children their own video afterwards? Their own?
Yeah, of course.
Essentially, because they were acting dressed up as animals, and they were put in a world which they also saw on a screen. That's an interesting thing. Well, can you tell us something about that? How they reacted, or if that changed their perspective, or if it broke it down even further?
Well, the films were shown to the kids, but also in the kids' classrooms, and there was like an educational program around it, and maybe alternative, like, how do we read images? What does that mean? How is it going to affect us? How does it affect the ones who are being represented? Who's benefiting from these images online? Because it's not the animals, most of all. And how can we change another way of like perceiving nature that is way more complex than this, like, you know, like old-fashioned kind of science lens through which we maybe still teach kids about biology, because that world is disappearing, and just taking like maybe the essences from that, but more the complexity of what it means to be alive right now is so much more beyond the binaries that we are taught and internalized as a sort of non-negotiable truth. So yeah, so this is something that we try to bring along with the kids in the film, some of them.
I wanted to also ask, well, kind of a two-part question. Like, so who is your ideal like target audience for the work? And then is using kind of children or working with children in your work also a part of a way or a tactic to perhaps make your audience care more, you know, and have more empathy? Because I'm sure that helps, right? Because there is an element of humor and I guess like innocent children that maybe people will be like, oh, okay, because most humans are horrible and we need something to kind of be a buffer for people actually to change their bullshit. So I thought, is that kind of...
Yeah, I mean, okay, multiple things you said. Hold on, what was it? All interesting. But now I forgot the beginning because I was like, yeah, I wrote something about this. Where is it? And then I couldn't find it, and then I forgot.
Yeah, with the ideal audience, like.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what I aim at with these types of films is that the entrance is for kids that are at a certain level of maturity, or like in their place where they are as children, and also at the same time this could be for biologists or people who are into animal rights or people who are really educated around the subject, and to me, like anyone in between who has an interest, because I think the movie hits on so many different levels that you can really take it in from where you are at in your own knowledge. And that's how I hope, that's my aim, to make these films in a way, accessible for, and children and people who are highly educated around animal rights, you know, and maybe media people or, So in that sense, my audience, I hope, is just as wide as possible. And what I'm trying to do is that it's not like a lecture, or it's not like a dogmatic kind of way of storytelling, because the way of storytelling is really open, because it also embraces humor. And therefore, I hope that the audience can make their own decisions about what they are perceiving and how that feels to them and where they are at, and just leave that open. And to me, this is also where the beauty and the complexity of making something like art can be. Like, it doesn't have to be the answer, because it's not on policy level, it's just like, this is happening, like, and you can take it on the levels where you yourself are at. And in a way, like, having children say it is like bypassing so many projections that we would have of having adults say the same things, but they could say it shorter and more from the heart. And that's judged, you know, like, as that's not really knowledge. If you talk from the heart, you know, you talk from the heart. So, and that's something that pure empathy that just comes out, you know, is a huge power, and I think should have its place. And I think through children is one way of like bringing that forward. And also that children have an inherent knowledge that is usually condemned and like overridden by what we call like culture, instead of maybe that really needs a place in culture that we don't have anymore. For example, also how we other cultures, like, oh yeah, they're a little bit spiritual and they do weird rituals and they love nature and, you know, they believe in God, and and all these things. Children also, they are allowed to have it because they're children, but it's also a huge judgment that comes with this, called also adultism. So, which I think says a lot about our own shadow in the West, you know, where we don't permit ourselves to go because it's seen as like immature or underdeveloped or unknowledgeable.
I have another question, because your movie or your work really reminds me of these. I'm 25, and I used to read this VNF magazines, you know, that with a panda on the front, and I would, or my parents would give the magazine money, and I would read that every month. You know what I mean? It's this.
I can't really hear you.
It's the nature magazine of the Dutch the Wereld Natuurfonds.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nature fund in the Netherlands, making a magazine for kids to tell them, inform them about nature.
And that really reminds me of your work in a way, but it seems like a contemporary way to reach kids. It's not via the magazine or the Donald Duck or whatever. It's via YouTube or via social media. But the question comes then: what do I do as a kid with that? Because with the magazine, I was also, at some point, I was like, I'm reading this. My parents are paying money. I'm seeing sharks and tigers, and I'm learning about them. But what do I do with that? How do I help them? Am I part of this world? That still is a question that at some point you just give up because you don't know how to deal with that. And I'm curious if kids nowadays would react the same way to your movies. It's a hard question, maybe a bit cynical. It's not meant to be cynical, but I hope you have an answer to that.
So basically, the question is if you think that your movie will mobilize kids to come in action.
Or something like that.
Yeah, of course, I hope so. But, or not even kids, but also maybe educational systems, you know, and change the way that knowledge is being transgressed. Like, how do we teach kids? And also, again, like what we see is this, we teach that the animal is kind of in service of us, you know, they don't have a right to just be the animal, like they need to mean something for us in the theater that we made of nature. And personally, I think like this will just grow. And in the end, we just experience nature as some archaic fact in a, you know, 3D reality with our virtual boop 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 on, and then we can do anything what we want because it's like in the virtual space. But to just, preserve animals, it's a very, very complex issue, you know. And
I have one question about that because you pose very much the sort of opposition animal-human. And I really question that because I think it's really important to think about a rights discourse, and what kind of rights discourse we should have to also allow non-human animals to have a political voice. But I think it's really, if you look at the colonial history of animalization, I think it's much more interesting not think just about this opposition of humans towards non-human, because there's a whole history where humans as much have been animalized and still are. I think about slaves or women, refugees, as much as animals are. And in that sense, I think the category of animal is much more a moral category than a species category. So I think
I can't really hear you.
Yeah.
But it sounds very interesting.
So that it's not only animals that have been captured or has been done injustice, but also the human race have
of
done.
Course. It's all interwoven in our mentality, you know, in the lens through which we see that we are entitled to just go to a country, pick up the animal and bring it somewhere else. I mean, of course, we did this also with humans. And this is why I mentioned like colonialism and white supremacy is a huge patriarchal culture, as a huge, you know, that's where we're in, that's the matrix we're in. And do we want to shift that paradigm. And that's all, yeah, interwoven with each other.
So we can also assume that these animals are being done injustice, but they can also be a metaphor for ourself, other person, other human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. How we treat animals is a mirror for where we are as humans, you know? Like this is a self-portrait.
I don't think so.
There's no opposition here.
You shouldn't anthropomorphize animals to understand them. There's a real danger there. Dressing up as a tiger doesn't mean you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to oppose.
Yeah.
Or of a case, I guess, or maybe I'm hearing it wrong, where I know people who love their dogs, oh my God, like they're best friends, but they're still white supremacists. You know, so I don't think if you care for animals, then eliminates or shows that then you care for other species. You know?
No, I don't think so either. That's why like love and care, how it shows up in this publication is like there's a lot of love and care in it, but is this love and care, or is it proximity, violence, and domination? You know?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, there's seems to be no more questions.
All right.
Well, we want to thank you for your presentation, Melanie.
Thank you too. Thank you for coming and thank you for listening. And yeah.
That was very great. So a round of applause for you.
Thank you for organizing this.
And we hope to see the results of your research soon. Also, what will happen after you gather all this information. So good luck.
Thank you. That will take a lifetime. Well, I'll see you there.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Have a wonderful evening. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.